now, most of you probably know that the final episode of the Amazing Digital Circus is coming to theaters, but have you actually taken a close look at the official poster? And no, I'm not talking about Jax's role, the cameos by Ribbit and Kaufmo, or even the keyholes. I'm talking about the background, specifically the numerous cracks snaking across the circus floor. It's a tiny detail, but it's quickly becoming the biggest mystery surrounding the final act. One thing is for sure, these aren't the eyes of the abstractions. We know them for their signature pink, cyan, and yellow palette, so if it's not them, then what are they? To understand this, we have to remember how well this series plays with the feeling of being watched. We've seen it everywhere, from Caine's eyes to the vacant, manic stares of the abstractions, and even Abel, who has been keeping tabs on everyone since the pilot, with a hidden appearance in every episode. But these eyes peeking through the cracks could mean so many things. Are they a remnant of Caine? The liberation of the abstractions? Or maybe a different entity entirely? An AI that's been biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. With Caine out of the picture and the circus members on the brink of a total breakdown, there's never been a better time to strike. These eyes could be the key to the entire finale, and today, I'm gonna tell you why. The first time we saw these cracks was on the theatrical release poster for episode 9, the last act. On one side, in what looks like the circus floor after Caine's deletion, meaning when everything turned gray and started falling apart, we see the ground cracking. Through those fissures, a set of eyes surrounded by dense darkness peeks out. The first theory is that these could be the eyes of the abstracted, trying to escape the cellar now that Caine is gone. The obvious flaw in this idea, though, is that the eyes of the abstracted are incredibly iconic, and they look absolutely nothing like the ones in the image. These eyes look way too simple, lacking the vibrant colors of humans who have descended into madness. However, the fact that Caine is gone could mean that the madness caused by the tampering with their minds has vanished. That madness was represented by their colorful eyes, so these calmer, duller eyes might just be them curiously looking at the outside world, unable to get out just yet, but completely bewildered after waking up for a second time in a body they don't recognize, surrounded by total darkness. Interestingly enough, if you look closely at some of these eyes, the pupils are different. Some look like a U, or maybe even a loading symbol like you'd see on a YouTube video. This could imply that the reason the abstracted didn't instantly break out of the cellar the second Caine disappeared is that they just aren't ready yet. Their minds are still loading the data that Caine forcibly ripped away from them. It's possible that until that loading process finishes, they'll stay in a calm state, analyzing their surroundings through the cracks. This is something we actually see in the trailer. We see Pomni looking at something with absolute dread, possibly one of these eyes watching her from the walls. Now, since they are in a cellar, the angle Pomni is looking at might not perfectly line up if the cracks are actually coming from the floor. But you know who does fit this concept perfectly? Zubul. We literally see Zubul looking down at the ground in shock, likely making first contact with one of these eyes watching them. But since nothing bad happens immediately, the cast might still have enough time to fix the chaos in the circus. Even so, the pressure from the cracks will slowly build, pushing them to the brink of despair, which is exactly where we see Pomni crying once again. Once the abstracted finally break free, there are two main possibilities. The first is that they remain hostile due to the sheer shock of finding everything destroyed, and themselves turned into corrupted beings incapable of even communicating. It would be similar to what happened to Kaufmo in the pilot, except this time, being trapped in the ruins of the circus, the psychological impact would be infinitely worse. The second possibility is that, contrary to what we might expect, when the abstracted regain their memories, they also regain their sanity. They might stay calm and recognize their old friends, like Scratch or Queenie recognizing Kinger, or Ribbit and Kaufmo recognizing Jax. However, the fact that their corrupted bodies won't let them communicate freely would be a massive hurdle. They'd have to use their still imperfect abilities to harness imagination, just like we saw in the last episode, to dive into their own minds and memories. From the inside, they could fix everything Caine broke in their heads. This would be the perfect setup for us to see Ribbit and Jax's memories, exploring the conflict that caused their falling out and Ribbit's eventual abstraction. Through this method, we could even explore the past of Scratch, the very first abstracted, and uncover secrets that even Kinger didn't know. Remember, Scratch was the one who gave Kinger the advice to create his first creative AI, Caine, whose original name he can't recall. But in this mental journey, we might finally discover it. They could enter his mind similarly to how Jax almost abstracted in episode 7, experiencing a psychedelic landscape that represents a mind on the verge of abstraction. But it wouldn't be that easy. We already know that Jax's unstable mind is going to be a massive problem in the series finale. There have been constant hints about his intense state of denial, teased both in the trailer and the multiple images we've gotten so far. The poster itself might even be confirming that diving into the humans' minds will be the ultimate way they try to fix this whole mess. Now, if the abstracted behind the cracks theory doesn't convince you, and you're looking for an even crazier explanation, we could consider the possibility that these eyes belong to Caine. Remember his swarm of eyes that constantly surveilled the circus? Now that he's gone, they could be lurking in the shadows, keeping an eye on Pomni and the gang to figure out exactly why they decided to delete him. You might be thinking that Caine was completely wiped from the simulation, making it impossible for his eyes to still be hiding in the shadows. However, if we look back at what happened with the red and blue AIs in episode 8, we might find our answer. After the first AI went rogue and became unstable, they locked it in an isolated room just to learn from their mistakes and create a new, more stable AI. But why lock it up if they could just delete it and prevent further issues? That would have avoided the entire current conflict, right? Well, it seems things aren't as simple as we think. It appears it was impossible for Kinger and his team to fully delete them. Fragments always remained. We can assume this because Caine himself, who is the result of the red AI absorbing the blue AI, still retains traces of the AI that replaced him, Bubble. And we literally see Bubble pointing out how flawed Caine is, pushing him right to the breaking point of madness we witnessed in episode 8. If real-world Kinger couldn't completely delete the red AI, it's hard to imagine that an in-game Kinger, limited in both resources and mental stability, could fully erase Caine. We know that something or someone behind the computer tried to guide Kinger into deleting Caine against his will. Kinger only wanted to shut him down temporarily, probably knowing that without the Ringmaster, all of his creations would eventually collapse, leaving them, in the worst case scenario, wandering through the endless void for all eternity. Even so, there's still hope we might see Caine again for the finale. These eyes could be the proof that he's still watching them, but this time trying to understand them from a different perspective. Pun absolutely intended. He's no longer the all-powerful Caine who could force them into wacky adventures on a whim. Now, as he slowly recovers, all he can do is observe them, unable to ignore or silence them. This could be the Jawed Guy's chance to become a better host once he returns to full power. Sadly, the most likely outcome is that both Caine and Kinger know there is no real way to escape, and that they are doomed to be trapped for eternity. But this time around, the new Caine would be much more empathetic. He'd promise never to tamper with their minds again, working alongside them to make their eternity a lot more pleasant. They might even team up to solve the abstraction problem, trying to revert the victims back to normal. It would be a monumental task that would take a long time, leaving the ultimate fate of our beloved characters slightly up in the air, but with a strong sense of hope that eventually, everything will be okay. But hey, if we want to cover all our bases, we have to consider that the eyes and the cracks represent an unknown danger that's been teased in these last few episodes. Scratch's growing relevance could be hinting that his past and his goals won't be left unexplained. Let's not forget, this guy is practically Caine's original creator, having given Kinger the advice needed to develop him. After finding out he had a brain tumor and little hope of survival, he likely sought to extend his life in the digital plane. Obviously, trying to cheat his tragic fate didn't work out, and he ended up abstracted and locked in Caine's cellar. Now that he's free and has no obstacles in his way, he might use his knowledge and creativity to mold a digital circus to his will. This doesn't necessarily mean something evil. Since Scratch is also human, he could understand human emotions, feelings, and anxieties way better than Caine ever did, taking them into account and avoiding his predecessor's mistakes. But that would be the best possible ending. A super happy one without much conflict. and honestly, that doesn't really fit the eccentric style Gooseworks is known for. So if we factor in that Scratch's tumor caused severe mental issues before he entered the circus, issues that would inherently make his digital scan unstable, we can theorize about his time locked in the pitch black cellar. Thanks to Kinger's memory of the abstracted Queenie, we know that the dark calms their minds. It doesn't revert them to who they were, but it gives them enough peace to regain a bit of rationality. This could be how Scratch slowly regained his consciousness, but since he's still corrupted, combined with the mental instability from his tumor, he'd be pushed right to the edge of madness, similar to, or even worse than, what we saw with Caine in the last episode. These cracks would be Scratch's way of analyzing the situation. If the remaining humans manage to take down Caine, they could take him down too. So he spends most of the episode watching them, waiting for the exact right moment to strike. He might even have control over the rest of the abstracted, using his old friends against the cast to seize control of the circus ruins. The gang would have to run away while trying to figure out how to solve this brand new, unexpected conflict. They'd likely realize that the only way to stop him is to enter his mind and memories to fix him from the inside. But what if he's connected to the minds of all the abstracted? We've talked about this theory in previous videos on the channel, where we looked at Jax's near abstraction as a clue that the consciousnesses of the abstracted are all merged together in a peaceful hive mind. We saw Jax feeling the presence of his old friends, urging him to join them for eternity, an idea the rabbit actually didn't seem to hate right before Pomni knocking on his door snapped him out of it. Something similar could happen here, with all or most of the cast diving into Scratch's mind. Along the way, they'd have to navigate the memories of all the abstracted. We'd see beautiful moments between Kinger and Queenie, or the full story behind Kaufmo's abstraction. But the most crucial part would be Ribbit's memories, where we'd finally witness the trauma and regrets that made Jax put up his distant persona in the present day. However, being forced to relive his past mistakes might be too much for the rabbit's fragile mind to handle. This could cause glitches in the simulation, as the code struggles to reconcile Jax's true feelings with the constant state of denial that makes him repeat his mistakes over and over. Since they'd all be mentally linked at this point, Jax's breakdown would become a massive threat to the rest of the crew. They'd have to save Jax from himself first before they could continue their mission to repair Scratch. Of course, all these possibilities might not even come close to the actual surprises Glitch and Gooseworks have in store for the finale. If we want to go even deeper down the rabbit hole, we could view these cracks as proof that something has always been lurking behind the scenes of the circus. I'm talking, of course, about the unknown AI we saw in the files when Kinger was trying to stop Caine. Many think this unknown AI could be the blue AI from episode 8 that wasn't fully assimilated by the red AI, Caine. Others think it's Bubble, or even Abel himself. Some believe that whatever this thing is, it's the entity responsible for forcing Kinger to delete Caine so it could finally take control. All of these scenarios have evidence for and against them, and they all have narrative gaps that we're trying to fill one way or another. Since we don't have the full picture yet, the best thing we can do right now is let our imaginations run wild. Until we see the finale and can hopefully confirm at least one of our crazy theories, all we can do is keep theorizing. Whether you're watching it on the big screen or waiting for the free release like we always do, remember, no theory is 100% confirmed. But by that same logic, no theory is too crazy to imagine, because in this bizarre, chaotic, and incredibly beloved series called The Amazing Digital Circus, absolutely anything is possible.